and thus we are onto an entirely new cosmos and ready for a new arc and new adventures along the way. I'm very curious to see like what exactly is going to be the overall difference in some of these different cosmoses, because the thing I think that's going to be really really telling about just in general the idea of like, oh yeah, this is an entire different sector of the universe and stuff, is the whole fact that that the cosmoses are all cut off because of the dragons and stuff. So there probably isn't a lot of like cross like existence between the two of them. You probably don't get many people going from one to another. Probably don't even get like known information and going like, oh yeah, this is what goes on over here or whatever. It's probably completely cut off, I would imagine, because it's not like they can like send letters or information when it's deep long areas of space separated by a bunch of potential very dangerous dragons. Anyway, then they get to the Dragon Fall and they see all these dragons, and it's like they essentially form this like a massive web around the Sakura Cosmos. Actually, I'm wondering if it's just the Sakura Cosmos maybe that the Dragon Fall show up. I guess that would probably I don't know why I thought that it's around every cosmos. I think it's only at least known right now around the Sakura Cosmos. So I guess either way, like they're cut off, so they're probably not going to know exactly all this information about all the other cosmoses, aside from probably like their names, I would guess. Who knows though? We'll have to wait and see about just like certain smaller details like that. But while they're like figuring out like, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to get through this? Or like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to try and just traverse through at full speed and just be battle ready and just prepared. But during that, when they see that all the robots are pretty much broken, like all these mechanical dragons are just destroyed, I'm very curious to know like if they're ever going to talk about like where the dragons come from, like if they're like a living machine, like something kind of like Machias, or I never remember how to pronounce it. Machias from Fairy Tail. They're organic living machine people, or again, probably the easiest one to bring up, something like the Transformers. The Autobots and the Decepticons, and Cybertronians, I guess is the better way to put it. But organic machines, maybe they're just like that. Who knows? Or if they were made by somebody. But all the dragons are pretty much dead, and when they're like thinking about it, like Witches realize that this is like essentially the wake of the Eden's One. Like he came through and pretty much took all these out, and she thinks that like the Eden's One also has Etherion. I'm wondering what the difference is going to be between Etherions and Eden Zero, because like in Rave Master it was just kind of like this raw power, like it could create stuff, it could, it can just like do normal energy attacks. It had more of like this. I think almost like a creation power, I think is the easiest way to do it. Or just some like super raw energy. Fairy Tail's Etherion was more of just like a mixture of different elements and kind of creating this like raw space-time energy that was used for pretty much just a large-scale weapon. With Eden Zero, I'm actually really hoping it's more focused on the whole machine aspect. Like maybe it is a giant kind of like EMP cannon, or like an overload cannon. Imagine it's something like, instead of it just being like, oh yeah, it's like just like a giant super weapon, if it's instead something like it'll overcharge a bunch of like machines, and it will cause the machinery all to like fail and like explode and just kind of like short circuit. It's kind of like this, like I guess really just like an anti-machine kind of like weapon is the way I think about it, instead of it just being like straight cannon. It's like in the idea of the series, like if you have something that can completely like destroy somebody's ship, like circuitry and whatever, or like when you're in space, they're screwed. That's such an easy win as well, without it being like just like, oh, it's a big cannon. It's got an extra specific trait to it if it's more machinery centered, and I think it would be cool because it would play more into obviously the more space and ship. I was going to say space and spaceship, but it sounded horrible. Interstellar transverse vessel aspect of the series, because I do really like the spaceship portion of Eden Zero, and I'm really hoping the spaceships are never kind of brushed over. And I don't like to use many comparisons that might come off negative, but it is one thing that I feel like it's okay just because the author has mentioned that it had a little bit of issues, and like in One Piece, like the ships aren't really that important in terms of like the battles, because as he said, like Oda said this himself, most of the characters on the ships are more powerful than what the ships can do themselves. Whereas I'm hoping Eden Zero, like their big power level stuff really sticks to like their ships and like big interstellar transverse vessels as a easier way to say it apparently. Kind of like systems, like they could have their own like personal abilities, but I'm hoping like all the big crazy stuff is all in whatever big ships and weapons they have ready. I'm hoping that's the case, because then you could still do like interstellar battles without it being like, why don't they just get out and fight each other, like, because eventually they can have power levels beyond their ships, but I'm hoping for the most part like their ships are always going to be like the big thing if they're going to have some big intense mega fight. But from that, they're kind of just going through, and some of the dragons are still, there's just a couple of them that are attacking them, and during this, they're like, okay, what we need to do is we need to try and evade. There's a couple more after the first one that shows up, and they show actually that they have like kind of like initially it's just like, oh yeah, we're getting in our turrets and we're shooting at them, but they activate like what was it called, an ether link. I like that Jin was in the spot, and he's like gonna be their kind of like their gunman. I thought that was pretty badass, and it fits his really cool style. During that as well, Homura and Sylph having potentially a pretty good friendship, I think will be really funny. I like that Sylph clearly is probably like, if it wasn't for the fact that she didn't have her emotions, she would probably be like a much more kind of like bright character. But it is kind of funny to see her kind of do like actions that would be maybe in something like that, but with like almost this dead emotion face. And thanks to her, she was able to get Jin to forgive Homura, be nice to her, because Jin was a little upset that Homura's the one that beat his sister. But thanks to Sylph being okay with it, now we got Jin being cool with it as well. But they activate like this ether link, which essentially puts whatever their ether gear power into their ship weapons, which is really cool. I like that a lot. Like I said, it'll be really interesting to see like fights later when it comes to ships, because now they have something that can kind of like integrate their own abilities into when they're going to be in spaceship combat, interstellar transverse vessel combat. Like you have like Rebecca's, she just pretty much turns it into like a super machine gun. Jin is able to use like wind currents in space. As we know, here comes Wise and his amazingly versatile ability. He just pretty much just alters the bullets, turns one into like a net shooting gun. And Shiki, one thing I actually really was surprised with Shiki is Shiki using his ether gear goes into his Demon King form pretty easily, like pretty early. I was actually really surprised about that. I didn't think it was going to be something that he could activate at will now, but I guess that's going to be his thing. I guess that's going to be what he's going to be dropping here. And again, like, I'll only use this just because it's such an easy example right now. It's like when you look at like this system of like their forms and stuff, like probably the equivalent obviously with Fairy Tail is like Natsu's Dragon Force, but he couldn't even really activate that at will until 400 plus chapters in the series, where the first time after she uses his Demon King form in his overdrive, he's able to do it at will. Granted, I don't think this is the full version, but the fact that he can just drop it now already is definitely pretty noteworthy. Like I think him having that ability already is actually going to be pretty useful, as well as really cool to see like that he has this at the ready in case he needs to use it. But he links up to the weapons, creates, a big gravity blast that's able to keep all the dragons in one spot, pull them together, and then they're able to get into the next cosmos. And in this next one, there's like a giant, like current of water in the ocean. They have all these fish, including this gigantic fish. I like seeing the just massive space monster. I'm hoping we can get more of that. I really want to see more of these super giant, like, just fish. Well, while we're over here, maybe like could you imagine like a space shark? That'll be badass. But they're in this this cosmos. They said they said it must be the Poseidon Narrow sector, and I don't know how to pronounce it, Aoi Cosmos. So essentially, this is going to be more of like more of an aquatic themed place, more of like just like this themed in an oceanic style. So the thing with this one that I'm very curious about is the fact that we've got all these space fish. And we know that there was like some difference in the timeline, and obviously Captain Connor. I'm wondering if the space fish and the fact that Connor didn't have his ship in the other timeline maybe had something to do with this cosmos. Like maybe the difference is he like tried to come over to the soccer cosmos, or tried to leave by himself without the full crew of the Eden's One or something. I feel like it's gotta have something to do with these weirdo space fish. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe there's way more over here than there is in the soccer cosmos, and it's just like the more like coincidental. Like, oh yeah, they both have space fish, but the difference is this one also has absurd space fish, or something extra. Like maybe just a higher level of frequency when it comes to them. Either way, I'm very interested to see what the plan is for this next arc. The antagonist, definitely, I'm very hyped to see after getting Drac and Joe. Like, actually, I think one thing I'd really like is I'd like to see an enemy crew, like an enemy, like, younger crew, like, maybe of the same kind of, like, prestige as, like, Shiki's, maybe some young, up-and-coming, space adventurers that they can kind of compete against. Like, not as much of a dark and heavy arc, but maybe more of like an upbeat one. Like maybe they find some rivals and we get a couple chapters where they're like, we're going to compete to see who's the first one to do X, Y, or Z. And then, it's more of like okay, cool. Maybe they make some allies and then get comfortable before they go into like another like crazy, big dangerous situation, some absurd like battle arc or something. But as it were, for the most part, it was just a nice setup chapter and kind of just showing the exposition and display of like their weapon. I think the Etherlink weapons are really cool. I think that's going to be a really badass way to see like hyped and bigger versions of their attacks and stuff in space using their ships, and something that we can look forward to in the future for space battles. I'm really hoping Eden Zero doesn't skip over like space battles. I think it's been pretty good so far. Doesn't need to have anything absurd, but at the same time, it's good to see just like the displays of them for the future when we actually get like a very, very focused space, just a big space battle between two cruise ships. So anyway, also the new cover looks really nice. I really like the purple color with Eden Zero. I think it looks fantastic with the whole space theme. Anyway, yeah, comment below, thumbs up the video button, the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. Other than that, I appreciate everyone who's already subscribed, and I thank you all for listening. Bye.